everybody, it's time for more KHANTEHNT with me, Digibro, and...
the best guy ever, me. I'm back, baby, and we've got KHANTEHNT out the wazoo for you. How you doing, Digi?
This is our first not in-person version of this show, but we're talking about Cautious Hero, episodes 1 through 4. Nate, I was extremely curious to hear your opinions on the show because the main character is literally you.
I knew you'd say that, as I'm sure everyone throughout the world will be saying. I right out of the gate, I have never felt more kinship with a character in my life. I mean, this harkens back to those poor tortured souls who watched me and my, what fucking was it, Pokemon Diamond Nuzlocke. I mean, just one little excerpt out of my life was the not 1, not 2, not 3, but I think 4 weeks I spent simply running back and forth during this Nuzlocke to get my Baneri's friendship values all the way up so that return would deal max damage, and of course only for me to evolve it to Lopunny and immediately let it die during grinding in that Nuzlocke, all for nothing. But that's just the way it goes for me. So this character, overly cautious, over prepares for everything. The other thing I was immediately reminded of was as we were planning our trip down for me to see you to make this thing that has become KHANTEHNT. I was pressing for details, okay, let's do as much beforehand as we can. Let's organize everything, and you're not in as much of a hurry to get everything organized. So
I'm a just rush in and figure it out in the moment kind of guy. I'm not very. I mean, I'm cautious in as much as, I might grind and get a little over leveled before I go into an area. You know,
sure.
Like, I think back to Bloodborne, because I sucked at the Souls games, and what finally allowed me to be able to play them was just grinding for 5 hours right at the start of the game, and then the rest of it was much easier from that point. So I appreciate the cautious hero mindset, but this guy takes it to the most ridiculous extreme it could possibly be taken to, even further than best guy ever, if that's believable.
It is true, because I always think to myself, the Nuzlocke thing really is a great comparison, because the rules that we set for ourselves, if you're just playing Pokemon, you can go up to level 99, level 100 anytime if you really want to just spend days and weeks of your life just grinding on the low level mobs around. But with the Nuzlocke rules, there is a level cap for any given gym leader or opponent. Yeah. So thank God there is a limit to how much you're even allowed to train and prepare.
Or else it would have been too much.
It would be. So I love having those
couldn't help
caps.
but think about what I like about this character is that I want to imagine him in different video games and how would he prepare? In Pokemon. What level would he get his starters to? First of all, he'd probably catch a full team of 6, and before he got to the first gym, train them all to third evolutions before he even fought Brock. Not that that's necessary in that game, but neither is what he does in this show. So I guess we'll get right into actually discussing it. I mean, first of all, I just want to know what is your general opinion of Cautious Hero? Because I talked about the first episode in my Isekai War video.
Right.
Now that we've watched 4, I have new opinions. I would say my overall feelings on the show are still essentially the same. It's a show that I find entertaining in spurts, but a lot of the jokes just don't make me laugh. And so ultimately I find myself kind of passively enjoying it. And there's moments that it's the kind of thing where I don't feel like I would have been missing out if I had never watched this, but watching it was not painful. And there were moments I was happy to have seen,
Yeah, this is definitely not a project without value artistically or entertainment-wise. I feel similarly. Okay, my biggest fear about this series is immediately going in, I hadn't seen this before. I know everybody's way into, waifu of the season, Restarte, right. Who has big titties, is cute, and she's kind of the star of the show in many ways. Where they, Yusha Man, Hero Boy is the straight man to her crazy antics, bouncing off him all the time, and just a lot of her animation is different, is creative, unique faces going on. There's real life there that was giving me a lot of entertainment value. But my biggest fear remains: how much can you really, as it always is, it's that old question of intellectual content, how much can you do with the premise of just an overly cautious hero who's super overpowered? And I must say, for these 4 episodes, they have not failed me in like the big battles that have happened, but how much more can they do is what I think, because initially he just trains too much, so he's like plenty powerful, but then he hides his power level. That's like the 2nd level joke, but beyond this, I worry a little bit, you know.
I mean, even just beyond like how far can they take the concept, I'm wondering how long can this story even last, because
we got 2 down, 2 big boys down out of 4, and then the leader, I guess.
That's what I would assume, and like they're already dead in 4 episodes. What I would assume is probably the first book is probably this whole section. If this isn't 2 books, I don't know what length they are or anything, but like, you know, it felt like, wow, we've made incredible progress, not just in that he's killed so many enemies, but that his power scaling has gone so insane, which is probably my favorite thing about the show. Like the number one thing that has kept my attention is that it's not just that he was overpowered or that he has like a ridiculous growth rate, which is somewhat common. And like, you know, the name of the show is like the more literal translation would be that the main character is a Mary Sue, but he's overly cautious. Like the ore tue or whatever is, I guess, the Japanese phrase for Mary Sue. So like the fact that he has like this insane stat growth is fairly normal for these shows, but like because he overtrains to such an insane degree, he's already got what is described as god tier powers. As of episode 4. So I'm wondering, like, is he gonna beat this whole world and then like move on to another more powerful world? Or
did you notice?
Like,
I would love that, because there's that other goddess who talks about how there was this one world that like she's like a legendary goddess. The goddesses in this show, they have to acquire heroes to save them. Blah blah blah. Our hero is one of them. And she sets up what could be a really interesting plot progression, because our hero, unlike most isekai heroes or whatever, they spend all their time in their one world. Our show is significantly like a higher meta level than that, where the guy is spending most of his time in like the god's celestial world, and we're aware of the other gods, of the other worlds going on. I would love it if he cruise controls through this fucking world. Maybe like the demon lord of this world like becomes his buddy with an actually like comparable power level or something creative like that. And then the 2 of them hop over to this other like high level dungeon. What if he ended up being the one who actually teams up with our main character? That would be dope. That would be dope.
And I mean, again, like you said, the high level goddess, she has saved 300 worlds. So like now, okay, so I don't know if did you catch on to like what was like being hinted at there with the whole failure of the previous mission. Because
do you think it's
I know
yeah, go on. I don't know.
I'm gonna spoil this show for people because, and this is not something I know. This is just based on what we've seen. So, you know, if you consider this to be a spoiler, then you're not paying as much attention as I am, I guess. But I think it's been pretty evident that he was that hero who failed. That he is the one who failed that other world,
and
that's
as a result of his failure,
so
he feels so incredible pressure to work hard and be prepared. You know, because at the very beginning of this, I was gonna say you want to see him in other games and stuff. I was curious what he's like just back in the real world, back in, you know, the land of Japan. What is he, a survivalist? Is he like a bodybuilder? I mean, I don't know. I'm very curious.
I think they kept that a secret so they could have this twist. Because and the hints we've had at it are that the high level goddess, she said that she had one failed mission. Right after this, he walks through the door and she like spills her drink, getting up in surprise at seeing him, obviously recognizing him. He doesn't seem to recognize her, or if he does, he's pretending he doesn't.
Memory wipe things, maybe. Could be anything for that. Yeah.
And of course, in episode 4, the like elder goddess says like, "Oh, you've grown since." You've grown so much.
I was wondering why she would say that. Yeah, okay, that's a good theory.
So I'm thinking it is that, you know, because he failed, he became uber cautious. And like I'm sure we're gonna eventually get like some kind of backstory on that. Maybe that'll be how they fill out 12 episodes while we're fucking charging through this story.
I hope they do. Yeah, big flashback or something.
Yeah, but I do think it's interesting because I did not expect there to be any particular justification for him being this way. I just thought of him as like a gamer dude who does this in games, which kind of doesn't make sense because he doesn't come off as a gamer dude. You know,
not at all. He's very ignorant to this
super
stuff.
cautious.
Yeah.
So like it might be that you know, that this is all just a result of like his obsession after he failed or something, assuming he even remembers it. Maybe it's just, you know, deep in the back of his psychology. It affected him in some
I wouldn't
way,
be surprised if that's the real explanation we ultimately get. Because, I mean, with a show like this, the most obvious thing to me in terms of writing would be like, I, as the viewer, am just curious why he's like this. You know, maybe it's we're at the level of, you know, isekais. This is a very self-aware show where it's not that interested in exploring it, but I'm sure interested in hearing about why he's like this and what he was like back home and, you know, everything related to that.
How do you feel about the sort of meta awareness of the story, where like at the beginning she's talking about how like these stories are like a dime a dozen now and all that?
Did you like the one? I loved the one line. There's been some genuine big laughs I've gotten from the show, and one of them was like at the very beginning she says like, oh, you know, we'll do the usual. We'll pick a hero from Japan, a young man from Japan, as we always do. like other nations aren't even considered over in America or anywhere else. So I mean that made me laugh. Just the awareness of that. I think that it's used, I mean, as that implies, relatively well for comedic effect. And it is, in many ways, the show does remind me a bit of Konosuba, but with like kind of less, I don't know, less lovable characters, I guess, so far.
I mean, the way that Restart is treated is very similar to Aqua. Like,
but I
it's
like
almost
Aqua
impossible.
More.
Yeah. She's a more interesting character because Restart
right.
is extremely reactionary. Like, she's basically, I mean, she's the straight man essentially, even though she is herself also a bit of a comedy character.
Right.
I remember having complained in my video about the first episode that both characters were kind of like simultaneously the dumb one and the straight man.
Yeah,
I'm glad that over time she's more taken the straight man position, and it's been more clear that like it's her reacting to him, you know.
True,
and her ridiculous faces make it entertaining. Like, if it weren't, this show would be significantly worse if not for the way that they animate Restart. Like,
no doubt. It's one of the stars of the show. Yeah, for sure. But
in my overall complaint, like, so this show is pretty much a straight comedy. Like, there's action elements, there's adventure elements, but the main focus is comedy, and you can really see that in the fact that the main character does return to the goddess realm to train all the time, which is very Konosuba-esque in how, like, they just stayed in the starting town and did not continue the adventure, you know? Like, his sort of flow-breaking, not caring about the actual way that this would normally play out, plays into the straight comedy nature of the show. But like in terms of the jokes, what this show tends to do is it sets up a scenario where it kind of riffs on an idea for like a few minutes at a time. And oftentimes it will end with one big joke that is really funny, but like everything leading up to it was like, okay, I get it. Like, yeah, I get the point. This is not that funny. You know?
Yeah.
And the perfect example would be the lead up to what I consider to be the funniest scene in the show so far, which I think is in episode 4. So, like, the way the scene plays out is that our main character tells everybody that he thinks they're useless. Like, there's all these people who are supposed to be helping him, and he's like, I don't need any of you. It's I super don't need you. I'm more than strong enough to do this by myself, including the goddess. So then he takes off and starts flying. Now, I thought it was funny when he was calling everybody useless, but like this is the next scene, is that the goddess like asks the elder gods, I guess, to give her the power of flight, which she's supposed to have, but she doesn't for some reason. I didn't think that was funny. Then she starts flying to catch up with them, and of course he's like way faster than her, so she's struggling to keep up. It's all right, but it just kind of keeps going on. Like and then there's a part where he stops to take her hand, and she's like, "Oh, he's so handsome. He's grabbing my hand. It's like a date. I'm gonna kiss him." Again, not really finding any of this that funny until he takes off flying Mach speed and her tits come ripping out of her shirt and flopping around madly. And that was fucking hilarious.
It was
And so
hilarious.
it was like...
It was.
On the one hand, it was like, man, that justified all this buildup and that joke was so funny.
Yeah.
But, like, individually, the jokes leading up to this could have been funnier. And I felt that in a lot of scenes where, like, one thing out of the, like, 5 different jokes they tried to make out of the scenario would be funny, but all the other ones were groan-worthy or, like, yeah, I get it, like, belaboring the point, you know?
I feel like someone could write, like, a study or, like, a deep analysis of, like, the comedy of this show and how, like, because the characters are thinner, you're not able to make as many like crafted jokes because we're so aware of what elements are on the table. It's always going to be a joke at he does really intense thing and everyone reacts to how intense it is. Like that is like every joke in the show. But like that tit flopping out thing. See, what I like about that is that this kind of like anime girls with crazy outfits, which is commented on in the show. The guy says first when they get there, everyone's going to think you're like a harlot because you're dressed, with your titties out. And she's like, no, I'm using magic. Okay, so that's touched on. And then when they do the flying thing and her titties flop out, in most anime, these impractical outfits like magically retain the tits inside the shirt just through defying all logic. But in this show, it's actually kind of realistically portrayed in a way that really sells that joke. And which reminds me of like another way that I appreciate kind of the realism of the show in that we see at the very episode 2 or whatever, when the first one of the 4 horsemen of the demon lord or whatever shows up, and she says like, I'm going to kill someone. And my immediate thought is, oh, they already set up that the main character is technically in no danger because if he dies, he goes back to his home world. That made me think this is a show that's trying to go for low stakes, no one's going to die. But then she immediately murders one of the townsfolk, and they're like, this is real death. This is, and then it's characters beyond that who we kind of care about more. Those ones don't get murdered because he acts fast enough, but characters really die, and there's like real consequences, and that commitment to like kind of what characters would really do, and even that lady, that 4 horsemen lady, says like, I will give you 10 minutes to come here. And one of the things that frustrates me about like anime writing a lot of the time is how characters just stick to exactly what they say in a like weird autistic way, which no evil person would actually do. But after 5 minutes, you're like, I'm bored. I'm killing this guy. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
And that's great. That's exactly what someone would do in that situation, I feel. So I'm won over by things like that. And my overall impression is pretty strong. I'm just a little worried about how far they can take this premise for me.
The decapitation definitely, that moment, like, definitely elevated the show for me a lot.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised that wasn't at the end of episode 1 because it's not really played that dramatically. And maybe it's just because they didn't want to give the impression that like this show is taking a dark shift all of a sudden.
Madoka style, episode 1,
But it did take a dark shift. Like that guy fucking dies and you're like, holy shit, like, I don't know. Maybe this was the perfect way to do it just because I still felt the impact without it being like, damaging the fact that this is a comedy show. But, I liked that moment. It definitely made the stakes feel real again. But then I was also like annoyed by how as he's like training to use up the whole 10 minutes as expanded into however long they have, there's this long scene of her continually going like, aren't you supposed to be a hero? You gotta go out there and fight him. He's like, I'm gonna train down to the wire. And she's like, but they're in danger, don't you see? And he's like, I'm gonna train down to the wire, bitch, will you stop? And like they go back and forth for a while.
That scene was a little bit dragged out. That might have been the most frustrating one.
Right, there's just like a bunch of little moments like that just make me go, I get it, please, like, can we get back to the to the thing? But again, I was feeling the tension. Like, I guess my frustration was out of wanting to continue the scenario and not be held up by this.
I very much agree with that. Which, by the way, this just reminds me, again, everything about this reminds me, like, of myself, and specifically just one more Nuzlocke thing. It was that the way that he's training right up to the wire is with, like, such high stakes. Someone could die permanently, and she's like, you're heartless. Like, we got to get there and save him as soon as possible. True, but he wants to go there with the highest chance of winning possible. Just like when I'm training for like one of the Nuzlocks and I know there's a level cap, you foolish people, if you're doing a Nuzlocke and there's a level cap, you don't just raise your Pokemon over that level cap and then just go into battle like that. What are you, an idiot? What you do is you go and you grind up experience such that they're at the level that they have to be. But the experience is just a sliver away from hitting the next level, so that when you go and you kill one Pokemon in battle, that Pokemon will immediately level up and have higher stats. And I kind of feel a kinship with his brinksmanship.
Did you go into the level of depth where you were like actually looking up exactly how much EXP you would gain from which monsters so that you could make sure you didn't cross that threshold?
At times, absolutely yes. At times, yes. When it had to be done. But usually Usually it's simpler than that because you can just see like, oh, I killed that guy. He gave me 300 experience. I can see that in the thing.
You know, and that brings me to something that I felt was missing from this show on the conceptual level, which is that you know, it's all fine and good that he levels up like crazy and like obsessively trains. And there's moments where he does really funny things using game mechanics. Like I loved the part where he goes right up to the priest and dumps the holy water on him immediately.
Yeah.
And I was at first surprised that he didn't just do it to everyone, but eventually he does. Like once the priest is dead, I was like, isn't he gonna pour it on? And he even pours it on the goddess.
Well, let's touch on that because the reason that was kind of the one moment I was a little bit frustrated with because that joke specifically of when he meets the priest, he's introduced to the concept of undead in like the scene before. Yeah. So now he knows that's a thing that can happen. And his logic for pouring, like as you just said, I too expect him to start pouring holy water on everyone to see who would be an undead. But he specifically pours it on the old priest because, like, quote, he's gonna be undead sooner or later anyway.
Right,
which is
he's like the older one. That was weird, and that was again
logical.
That had really bothered me until he started pouring it on everybody else, and then I was like, okay, well then shouldn't the logic just be that anybody could be undead? Like I understand if he's trying to say that's why he picked the priest first, but it wasn't really presented that way.
That was a moment where I felt like they were sacrificing a little bit of his character for the sake of this particular joke they wanted to make in this moment, and because that's not. He should have just sprayed holy water on everyone. They could have made the same joke. Well, okay, it wouldn't have worked, and that's why they chose to do it this way. So, you know, I don't know. That was just that was the one joke I felt they kind of sacrificed, keeping him on this logical train for, and I felt a little frustrated. So, I
mean, I will also say, like, this character, he is a little bit confusing, and there's the end of episode 2 is absolutely hilarious and a crazy, ridiculous thing to have happen, but it does lead me to question the like overall morality of this character, because the way this episode ends is that he kills the first of the demon lords, and then because what he does when he defeats an enemy is he just continually uses like these insanely high level fire spells to just completely disintegrate them into nothing. And so he's like, well, if even one cell of this demon lord survives, then who knows? She might come back to life. So he nukes her, but it's right in the middle of the city. So this town that he has just saved, he immediately burns to the ground. And as the town, which is fine, that would be like a pretty normal joke. As he's doing it, there's one guy who's like, his name's like Larry or something like that, some stupid name, who's like ass is on fire, and Restart puts it out. But then after they've burned the village down, they've been asked to leave, Restart literally says that they had murdered several people in those fires. That guy who she had rescued did in fact die. He burned to cinder. And several other villagers died.
You know, I meant to go back and double check because I thought to myself as I saw that, this has got to be one of those things they're using like kind of general language. Like, did they really die as a result of his actions?
I mean, she holds up like a piece of the guy's head and it like crumbles. You know?
Are you sure? Because I thought that, like, didn't she go and heal that guy as his ass is burning?
Yeah, she healed him, and then I think that afterwards, when he continued to blow up the village, the guy eventually died. Like, that was she seems to say, like, literally several people died. And
it does seem to say that. That's what I thought too, but I just thought that can't be right. That can't be right. Right?
It's like, what is... But then, when you think about it, so there's a big twist in episode 2 that the hero was hiding his power level the whole time. Like, right from the beginning, as soon as he realized he could hide his power level, he hid it even from the goddess, just in case somebody were to find out from her somehow, like through brainwashing or whatever.
Right.
If they were able to find out this data, he doesn't want the enemy to know his strength, so he can always overpower them. And he had gone back to, like, train for just, like, an extra amount of time before he fought this boss. However, once she finally finds out what his power level is, she realizes that he was more powerful than the Demon Lord from the start, from this emperor, which means that even the first guy who lost his head is entirely because the hero left the field. Like, he could have beaten her then and there and prevented any deaths from happening.
But, you know,
but he decided not to.
He's a utilitarian, man. Sacrifices have to be made, individual sacrifice, for the sake of making sure that he knows how powerful he is. He needs to protect himself and absolutely minimize risk so that he can save the whole fucking world. I mean, this is effectively his logic, and it makes some sense. It makes some sense.
I just have to wonder, like, if there, like, could he not have thought for 5 seconds about a better way to move the ashes of that demon out of town before fucking nuking them?
That's the thing. You know, because I'm thinking myself, that's so irresponsible, and it kind of does go against his, like, caution. Like, does he view these as acceptable losses? Because clearly the calculation he has to be making is, okay, like, if I were to pick up these ashes and move them, like, that puts me at risk. Like, it could revive in that process. I need to do it right here. I can't let the town evacuate first. I need to do it immediately. And because, like, I feel like in that moment, I worry that I'm being more logical and cautious than the character who's supposed to be that way. And that's where I see a little bit of cracks, and I worry, you know, about the writing a little bit.
It's hard because, like, in that moment, he kind of crosses, like, this moral event horizon. It's like, this guy is now kind of a bad guy. And in the preceding scene where the little girl comes up to him, like, he continues to be, like, an asshole. Like, in the next episode, he ends up training with one of the gods, the god of the sword, who lives in this place. And, like, beating this guy to a pulp and just, like, tormenting him and ruining his life, basically, to an extent where he won't look at swords anymore, which I did think was funny. I mean, this is another part where I thought they had belabored the joke a little bit too much, but, like, the end point we got to was funny. It was just, like, I don't think we needed to go through that many steps to get there, where, like, she comes to lunch, like, 4 days in a row to see this guy, you know, on this mental decline. But nonetheless, it was a fun idea that he, like, literally the scene where she finds him just literally beating the shit out of the guy, going full B-stars on him.
Indeed.
Just like Lugosi did to, what was it, Bill the Tiger. So yeah, like, in that moment, it's like, okay, we're really laying in on the idea that Cautious Hero is, like, not a good person. Like, he's an asshole. He's just, I mean, you know, he's just trying to get things done in the most efficient way he thinks that it can be done. And maybe he will be vindicated in the end, because so far, you know, his caution has paid off in every scenario. But, But, like, there's scenes, so at the end of episode 3, start of episode 4, they introduce these 2 little kids who are, like, Dragonborn or whatever, and they're supposed to be his companions, but they're super underleveled, and he's like, I don't need these fucking kids on my side. But he, like, says to Restart, like, there's no reason that they need to die meaningless deaths. And eventually he ends up rescuing one of them, sort of because he sees how much guts this kid has, and, like, he respects him on some level. So, like, he's not completely unemotional. He's not completely just doing exactly what needs to be done, or else he would have let that kid die. I mean, what difference does it make? How many people has he let die already? But, you know, it's just like, I thought the scenes were funny, but it does make the character somewhat confusing. And I can't always... I mean, maybe it's just meant to keep me on my toes, which it does. It does keep me on my toes, not being sure exactly what decisions he'll make, because his morals are so ambiguous, you know?
That's true.
But I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing.
It's hard. I guess that's the question. I don't know. I kind of feel like that's one of those things that they're not trying to do, but when you look at it a little bit critically, it does expose the potential deep immorality. I mean, the characters are all aware that it's fucked up. He burns down a whole town, potentially causing fatalities by doing so. But I just kind of wonder, and this is like I haven't read the light novel. I don't know who wrote it. Like, how good are they at writing? Are they thinking about these same questions? Because that would kind of inform how much respect I'm, like, kind of giving to the author, if I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, or, like, assume it's an intentional joke, or think this is, like, something they kind of didn't think about when they were writing it. And I'm not sure which of those two it is right now. I guess I need more information to make an ultimate judgment on that.
Yeah. So, something I think I was going to bring this up before, but I forgot. Something I really would have liked in this show would have been a more complex min-maxing system. Like, we ended up talking about the priest and the undead and stuff. I was talking about how, like, there is some video game referential stuff that I think is funny, like him, you know, carrying all these holy waters and dumping them on people, and particularly the fact that he tries to buy 1,000 holy waters, really took me back to my D&D days, because as you may have heard me talk about the one time I played D&D, I played a guy who was completely naked and just had 5,000 bottles of ale.
Right.
And I tried to solve all of my problems with ale. But it was funny because what the DM should have said to me when I told him I wanted to do that is what this guy says to Cautious Hero, which is like, you can't carry 1,000 bottles. Like, I don't have 1,000 bottles on hand. You can't carry 1,000 bottles. Like, like laying out all these reasons, and Hero's just like, fuck you, I can't have those bottles. But, he walks away with, I don't know, however many he could get.
An unspecified large amount. Yeah, maybe 99.
Yeah. But what I really wish was that there was some kind of like ridiculously complex min-maxing system where he would be like constantly changing out gear, or like something like
we see a little bit of that in episode 4 with the bracelets.
Yeah, I want something like the materia system, okay. Some kind of system where like there's all these different slightly variable, like, in a lot of RPGs they have these things where it's like you can attach things to your armor that will give it like +1 strength, or you could put one on that has +1 defense, and like, oh, what would be best for each situation, like which combinations of armor and trinkets should I make? And like, when you get into high level play and like a lot of MMOs and or like Diablo or something, or Neo is a perfect example of a game with like just such an insane depth of possible min-maxing that really doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't affect gameplay enough that there should be that much of it. But they put in like as many systems as they could. And it's not that I want the show to go and explain all this stuff. I just think it would be funny if we saw him in the background like constantly fidgeting with all the stuff he has to min-max, and like, just to be that one little bit more prepared that he could be going into this next fight.
That's true. That might be asking a bit much, because I don't feel like they put... I kind of felt like instead of them choosing to go deep into like a particularly well-developed system for this game, I felt like they were instead going more towards like, we want to just appeal to kind of like generic understandings of RPGs and video games, so that we don't have to explain in tons of detail. People will just kind of know this coming into the show, and they can kind of relax. And people know elemental stuff, they know sword techniques, they know general like flight abilities and whatnot. I think they kind of wanted that to not be... I don't feel like they wanted to spend a lot of time specifically going into that, really so that they have the opportunity to kind of surprise us by not allowing us to really figure things out ahead of time. They can just pull out the appropriate spell or ability to let the joke happen, let the fight go the way they want it to at a given time. And instead of min-maxing stuff, I felt like they did do that I appreciated was, with a guy like this, it only makes sense that they're not leaning into explaining all the systems, and our main character is ignorant of video games, which is rather essential, because I feel like what they're trying to do is keep the systems available to him relatively mysterious, at least at first. Because whatever system he's aware of, as soon as he knows that, like, okay, leveling's a thing, I'm going to level up all the way immediately. Oh, I just learned that synthesis is a thing. Now that I know that exists, I'm going to synthesize the best weapons instantly with the best materials. And, he learns about magic and all this stuff.
Using the goddess's hair, which I thought was pretty fun.
Using the goddess's hair, he becomes aware that, like, he could lose his sword. He needs to maximize his, like, physical hand-to-hand combat skills. Every system that he knows exists, he's going to grind to as high level as he can, which means in order to keep things kind of surprising for him and us, we need to not know about some of those systems, and they need to be revealed later to keep it, fresh.
Yeah, fair enough. So here's some things I wanted to comment on, because I think that with the visuals of this show, like, we can agree, facial expressions are amazing.
Very good.
There's some pretty good animation cuts, particularly when
good explosions.
Good explosions, and when the first boss like stabs herself in the fucking gut with a sword, and then the bigger form comes out of her body. That part looks really good. And like design wise, it's fine. I mean, it's like deliberately generic. It's part of the joke. So
yeah, it's not impressive, but it serves its
purpose. I wouldn't
purpose.
expect it to look any different than it does. It looks fine, but like, sound wise, now I think the voice acting in the show, particularly from Restart, is very good.
It's extremely over the top, but that's obviously to the point. And sometimes I was like, okay, dial it back a little bit. But I mean, obviously, for the audience it's intended for, it excels, and I'm sure people are going to go goo goo gaga bananas for her voice throughout the whole show.
She's voiced by a great actress, and but aside from the voice acting, the sound design is, I think, the worst thing about this show. particularly sound effects. And I really noticed this in episode 2 during the fight scenes and stuff, where there was these moments where like the visual would be very high impact and the sound effect is just very cheap and generic and not very high impact at all. Like for instance, when she stabbed herself in the stomach with the sword, it's just like a very like kind of sound. Like it's not like a, you know, it doesn't really sound like a sword, like a big blunt object carving through flesh.
I did think that moment kind of lacked impact, and that's probably why.
Yeah.
That's probably the main reason.
There was a lot of just limp sound effects or underdone, where like sometimes when they were sword fighting, not every time the swords hit was there a clang sound, you know, just like stuff that like made me think, man, if the sound effects and music were as good as the animation, this would be a really hype scene. I do not like the music in this show very much. Again, particularly episode 2, where like almost the whole episode, like because it's supposed to have kind of a tense atmosphere, it has this like generic tense music playing, but it doesn't really suit the tone of what's actually happening in the scenes, where there's all these comedic things happening, and like it's not all action, and the music is like this you know, beating you over the head kind of like dramatic action music that I just got really sick of hearing, and I didn't think was that good.
There's one or two distinct moments that I felt similarly, like the music felt out of place and uncomfortable.
There's like one decent song when he beats the second boss, like in his big moment, but it also just sounds like every like isekai song. Like it sounded like a song I had heard before, you know. And so just in general, I'm really let down by the music and sound design. Also, I hate the OP and ED.
I was thinking you'd like the opening. It's pretty hard rocking. I thought it was nice.
Okay. So the OP is by Myth and Royd, very popular band. They did the ReZero OP, which I didn't like either. They did make a song I liked last season for some other shitty isekai show that I thought was like the first Myth and Royd song I actually liked. But this one is cheesy and terrible. What is it? What's like the phrase they say in the chorus? It's like they say some dumb shit. I hated it. I hate the chugging riffs. This is like, it's a weird like nu metal kind of like nu metal pop song, I guess. I hate it. I think it sounds like shit, and I don't think the video is that interesting. The ED sounds god awful.
It was not great. It was not great.
The singing is really bad. The 3D dance sequence is not good, and like I like my 3D dance sequences. You know, if I'm gonna watch like Aikatsu or even Precure have like usually 3D dance sequence endings, this is not a good one. You know, her character model looks like shit.
The character model does look like shit, but the one thing I appreciated about this, I don't know if you noticed this, was that that scene is at least somewhat diegetic, in that the little remote that's given to the guy in episode 1 or 2, that's like a little statue of her, is clearly the same model, and it is that doll that's doing the dance, which we see like fall down at the end of the ED. So I kind of appreciated that, but was not impressed by the song, and obviously the CG model, not good, not great.
And how embarrassing that they didn't even have that shitty dance done until episode 3.
That was surprising. That was surprising.
And like the second episode just has like a white screen of so I'm like, but like even hearing the song then, I was like, oh no, like this song is awful. But yeah, and I think that this show actually skipped an episode. Like I don't know why. I don't know if it was like a sports game was on in their time slot, or if they just didn't finish the episode on time. But that's why there's only 4 episodes, because this show would have 5 if not for the fact that it skipped a week. So
okay. Well.
So I don't know if there's anything weird with the production of this show or anything like that. Haven't looked into it, but I mean, it overall looks pretty good, and like the voice acting is good. It's just the music and sound effects and the OP and ED that I really don't like. I completely skip every time.
Well, you and I both know, Digi, most people don't give a shit, and they just want to see the cute anime girl, who is pretty cute, do her cute things. So that's what I'm here for.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people watch these shows in fast forward, and they probably don't even notice the music or sound, any of the sound design.
Fair enough. Can't blame them.
So there's just a couple random notes I have about like certain scenes. Is there any other like broad stuff you wanted to talk about with this?
No, I mean, we pretty much captured it. I think I have a bit more of a favorable impression than you do. I definitely felt some cringing at some of the jokes about like, wow, he sure is strong, guys. I'm continually blown away by how strong he is. As I said, I'm a little concerned about how it'll go. But I did significantly enjoy the ride just because it had more heart and soul in the production than I expected it to have. I mean, there's like 2 or 3 characters who I give any shits about. Basically, just the 2 main characters are entertaining. Yeah. They could use more development. I want to know backstory about both of them. And we shouldn't forget that, like, this is a very generic show with, like, not a lot of novelty in the writing. It's just another one of these isekais. Oh, another one that's meta. I've never seen that done before. And so I'm not overly impressed by the premise or whatnot. But with what there is, I think it's so far been delivered pretty well. And so would I watch more? Yes. It's pretty good. It's been enjoyable. And I am curious to see at the very least, like, how this arc wraps. With, like, now that 2 are already dead of the Horsemen or whatever, how's it gonna end it up? I'm interested. They've got me.
Yeah, I mean, like, going back, when I think about, like, why I had initially dropped this show after the first episode, like, my main reasoning was, like, I don't think they can make any other joke than, like every joke is going to be predictable because it's all going to be about him being overpowered. And, like, when he nukes the slime in the first episode, like, that, I was like, yeah, of course. Like, no shit, that's what the cautious hero is going to do. But, like, the only thing I wasn't expecting was the sheer amount of power scaling that was going to happen. That, like, once we found out his true power level, it was going to be like, oh, this guy is way strong. Like, he's ludicrously powerful. He's got all these special abilities. And by episode 4, he's, like, doing dimensional magic. Like, I'm currently writing a parody light novel series, and, like, dimensional magic is a major part of my magic system. So, like, seeing that these guys were going to that level as well, I was like, okay, cool. Like, that's where I want it to go.
By the way, just on that specific subject, I was curious if you had a thought about this. He uses that dimensional slash whatever when he does, like, a warp slash when a guy he's, like, remote contacting him. He's torturing a guy. He's obviously not in the same physical location. He does whatever, some dimensional slash. I was curious, if he can slash off the guy's hand through a dimensional merge, why can't he cut off the guy's head and, like, kill him? Like, they go through this convoluted thing of teleporting to the guy, but it seems like this problem didn't have to be there in the first place, and I didn't have an explanation. But let me just say that on that, I did like the mechanisms that were then used, that this guy's like, oh, I'm aware of, like, my goddess's powers. There's a higher level goddess with, like, omniscience or clairvoyance or whatever. I can go see her in the goddess dimension to find out where this guy is. I mean, that's good usage. That was intelligence. Appreciate it on that level, but...
And I love how, like, kind of forceful and no nonsense he is. That he's just like, you're gonna do the thing I need you to do. Like, I'm not here to ask permission. I'm telling you to do this thing for me.
I respect it. I respect the initiative.
Here's just a couple weird little notes I have. One of them was about the god Cerseus, the god of the sword. There's this very weird scene where Restart is, like, talking to the head goddess, and she's explaining how, like, he used to be a human who was, like, cowardly, but he, like, ascended to godhood and became the god of the sword. But that, like, some element of his humanity had, like, imprinted on his soul, and, like, his soul continues to have those elements of the humanity. I don't know if that was just to explain this mechanic because it's going to be important later, but as character detail for this particular god, it was very weird. I was like, why do we care about this? Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
That was a very weird moment. I kind of felt like maybe it was introduced as, like, I mean, it was clearly there partially as a, like, oh, no, it's actually good that our main character is, like, beating him up. And, I mean, on the one level.
What it was?
Partially, yes. Partially, definitely so. And it sounds like he was beating it out of him, like, making him a better god, at least to a degree. But if that's all we ever get of this mechanic, I will be shocked. Because it feels like it was just such an out-of-nowhere fucking conversation to have. But I don't know. I guess we'll see as it goes on. Maybe the main character will become a god, and that'll be, like, his ultimate power scaling. I mean, that would make sense, right?
He basically is a god at this point, I think. Like, she said he has god-level magic, so...
But now that we know a human can become a god, surely this guy is a ripe candidate for the process.
Yeah, no question. The only other note I had written down was, and this is maybe sadistic of me to say, but MASH barely looked tortured. Like, you see all these torture implements sitting around, and he just looks like a little roughed up.
You know,
and
I looked closely at that, and the only things that seemed definitely done to him were bleeding from the head, so some head trauma, We saw a tooth, at least one tooth had been pulled out, and one fingernail had been pulled out. Now, those things suck.
I didn't notice that.
We did see that.
Fingernail is pretty brutal, but like, it just like it didn't make me feel tense when I saw him in the chair. Like they were showing all these torture implements, but he doesn't look that damaged. So it's like,
I mean, I was thinking to myself, man, if I was torturing this guy, I could do way more. I could fucking have this guy's organs all over the fucking floor by the end of this. So
I just feel like if he had looked a little bit worse, I would have actually believed there was a chance he could die, because characters have died, and like these kids seem worthless. So like I don't. At the time, I had no reason to believe they were going to continue to be important to the narrative, other than to be killed in this moment in a dark way. But just because he didn't look roughed up enough, I was like, oh, he'll probably be fine.
But that does kind of make me a little bit more impressed by the character, even after all the. I mean, at the very least, getting a fingernail ripped out, a tooth ripped out. Like, imagine that happening to you. He's still like, hey man, I'm gonna die, but you go save the world. I was a little impressed by that. I thought he was being a kind of a cool guy, heroic spirit.
Well, now that we've talked about all this, I think we can safely say that we are ready perfectly.
That was that was a great catchphrase. Very impressive. Oh, and by the way, there was one specific moment I wanted to bring up. I probably should have at the beginning, because it goes off of the funny joku that you were talking about when they were flying together, and it was my single favorite moment of the entire thing. This is a comedy, so it was a comedy moment. And it was right after the intense flying that you were talking about, Reset's tits go flopping out or whatever. It's after doing that. The whole point was, it was to go find the army of 10,000 undead that the necromancer guy. And so he does his, like, god-level spell that he figured out of summoning a giant fucking meteor, Madara Uchiha style. And similarly Madara Uchiha style, he does too, to make sure that it fucking finishes them. And so...
I mean, you have to think about the fact that in like classic Final Fantasy, Meteor is the strongest spell there is.
In Final Fantasy IV, it's a huge plot element and it kills it kills one of your party members, Tello, when you use it, and then that gets recycled in Final Fantasy VII, where Meteor is the literal logo of the game. It's a big fucking deal. So yeah, it pertains to all that shit. But that's not the funniest part of this whole joke. The funniest part of this joke is after doing the second meteor, he goes, ugh. And for the first time, he looks winded, he looks pained, he's leaning on Reset, and he's like, oh no. That was, she's like, oh yeah, he did 2 meteors, like the most powerful magic I've ever seen. That's gotta be, he's like, I have to go rest. I've only got 13,000 out of my total 15,000 MP. It's not even close to full, like, you gotta see it, but in the moment, I totally busted up. I for the first time, I actually let my guard down and thought, oh, okay, he's actually tired, and then came right back, and no, it was not even close to his full power. That was a good one. That was a good one.
All right, well, I've been Digibro, and you could find me on the Digibro channel here on YouTube, at Digibra on Twitter. All our fucking links are in the description, but you've been Best Guy Ever.
I sure
on the
have.
Best Guy Ever channel. And where else? Where all can we find you?
Well, we're on the Procrastinators channel together for our podcasting stuff, and you'll find us here twice a week on the KHANTEHNT channel.
KHANTEHNT!
Links below to all my other shit. So, hope you enjoyed this KHANTEHNT, boys and girls.
KHANTEHNT!
We'll be back
look forward to more KHANTEHNT. We'll be back on Friday with something. And remember, every Tuesday is an anime video. So if you just like us because you know we're anime guys, every Tuesday we're going to talk about some fucking current, relevant, popular anime shows.
That's the plan.
So stick around for that. And of course, we will be covering Cautious Hero again. We will cover each 4-episode chunk. That's the plan. That's the rhythm I'm trying to set up here with these KHANTEHNT videos.
Sounds good.
Looking forward to it.
Bye. KHANTEHNT!